Oh, hi. Yeah. Look, I'm busy right now. I'm trying to get this godforsaken engine to work. If I don't get this fixed, the Porsche thruster might blow up. I've been at this thing for hours and just won't. Actually, you know what? Screw this. Let's go watch a movie and fix it later. Besides, even if it does blow up, it should be fine. There's an airlock to the engine room in case of leakage, and I positioned the ship so that if the port side thruster stops going, it'll steer away from that planet over there. So I'm just gonna take a break and watch, Actually, I've been meaning to watch this for a while, Bionicle 2 Legends of Metru. Not only because I recently had a look at the first Bionicle movie, but also because I see a lot of different opinions on this one. Some people call it the best Bionicle film, while others say it's downright bad, so I'm kinda curious to take a look at this thing and see which one it is. It's worth pointing out right off the bat that despite it being titled Bionicle 2, it's not actually a sequel to Mask of Light, but rather a prequel. See, after the release of Mask of Light, the storyline for the toys went back to before the storyline began, detailing the events that led up to the status quo of 2001 Bionicle. Think of it like how in Star Wars, we first got the original trilogy, then a detour to the prequels, before continuing with the sequels. At the end of Mask of Light, they rediscovered the city of Metru, so this prequel era, if you will, is framed as the village elders, or the Turaga, telling the characters about said city and its history, so as to explain what a Metru even is or why they should go there. But anyway, as the movie begins, we are immediately told that in a time before time, the city of Metru was protected by guardians known as the Toa. However, these Toa soon fell one by one to an unrelenting shadow, one that wished to put the world to sleep so it could awaken it as its conqueror. We then come to this guy, Toa Khan, the last surviving Toa. He's playing with rocks when suddenly he's attacked by two Dark Hunters, Krekka and Nidiki. What are Dark Hunters? Well, the movie never explains it, but just consult Biosector 1 and you should be fine. Anyway, Toa Khan manages to escape using his awesome ear surfboard and hands over the rocks he played with to six so-called Matoran, these being Nokama, Onua, not to be confused with Onua, Wenua, Matao, Nuyu, and finally Wakama. Wakama's right in the middle of making a new mask when Khan shows up to hand him the last of the cool rocks. But they are soon interrupted by Nidiki, who looks very happy about being a mask, and Krekka. They manage to capture Khan, but since he willingly gave up in order to save Wakama, Wakama now thinks it's his fault that Khan was taken away. Turagaduma then shows up, asks if the Mask of Time is ready, installs the disc Wakama is using to make it, and then leaves. I actually quite like how this whole beginning bit is done. It starts with a cool rock in the sand, similar to the first film, detailing how the Toa fell one by one, but it then quickly cuts to actually showing the last Toa and how he falls. It also does this in a way that directly affects and thus leads into our main characters and their story. I didn't mind the opening of the first movie at all, but I do think this one does it better. Instead of having an exposition dump and then having the story start, the exposition is the beginning of the story. To add to that, the narration actually continues for a bit after the rocks in the sand bit. In fact, it doesn't actually stop until we run into the Matoran Wakama, because the narrator is Turaga Wakama from Mask of Light. It all just feels snappy and effective, you know? I like it. So anyway, all six Matoran, including Wakama, go to this place and have a bit of banter to try to figure out what to do with the rocks Khan gave to them.
We have all received these curious stones. All similar, yet each unique.
Like us, all Matoran. Some just more handsome looking than the rest.
You are literally the ugliest Matoran in this entire room right now. They figure out that they can put the rocks into these holes, and after a brief message from Toa Khan about saving the heart from Metru, they are all transformed into the Toa Metru. While trying to figure out what they are even supposed to do as Toa, Wakama receives a vision of Metru falling and him getting shot at by the so-called Great Discs. They discuss whether or not Wakama has found the only magic mushrooms growing in all of Metru before deciding that the vision was, in fact, a message from the Great Spirit. And so they agree to go look for the Great Discs while this bird thing spies on him. Why is Wakama's mask so low poly, by the way? Dude looks like a GameCube model. Should have turned that subdivision surface modifier up. No, wait, go back! Don't get me wrong, the movie as a whole does actually look pretty good. It's a massive step up from the previous film. I mean, just compare this establishing shot from Mask of Light to this establishing shot from Legends of Metru. That soft, waxy look from Mask of Light is mostly gone and everything looks far sharper. The animation is also vastly improved. I couldn't find a single instance of characters freezing in the background like they almost always did in the last movie. They also did the techno-organic look better, I think. I appreciate the fact that the characters were biomechanical instead of just looking like toys in Mask of Light, but the mix of bio and mecha could look a little strange sometimes. I think they nailed it here though. Bionicle toys were always filled with gaps, and so the character designers here decided to put all the organic tissue inside those gaps, instead of just spreading it across the outside. I'm not gonna pretend it's Pixar or anything, but I will say this movie does look legitimately good, even if it could perhaps look better. However, the one thing that bothers me, the one little detail that sticks out to me like a sore thumb, is Wakama's poly count. See how I look like you'd catch yourself if you try to hug me? That's because I am made of a low number of polygons. And because polygons are flat and made of lines, that gives a really jagged, edgy look. And that's what's going on here. And what's strange is that they do have a more detailed Wakama model. Now having different levels of detail is pretty common in 3D graphics, with the lower quality model being used when the camera is further away to save on resources. But the way they use it here seems almost random. Hell, there's this one moment near the end of the film where we see a close-up with the low-quality model, then cut to something else, and then cut to an identical shot but with the high-quality model. I know I'm making a big deal out of something that doesn't really matter, but like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it's the main character. As a computer graphics nerd, it just confuses my tiny, low-polygonal brain. But slightly pointless tangent aside, they go on their search for the 6 great Kanoka discs. Except the movie literally skips over that whole story. Turns out, this whole thing was being covered by the Bionicle comic book. But I'll get to that much later. Either way, I'm sure this minor oddity isn't a symptom of a core issue that affects the entire film. They bring the great disc to the Ragaduma at the Colosseum, just as he's announcing the disappearance of Toa Khan to the Matoran of Metru.
But with the help of the Vaki, order shall be maintained. Trust in me, and soon all your concerns will be laid to rest.
The Toa pledge themselves as the new guardians of Metru, but Doom dismisses their gifts and asks them to prove themselves in the Sea of Protodermis, as he calls it. The Toa then proceed to get the crap beaten out of them because apparently they can't use their mask powers, even though they were perfectly able to escape giant plants, climb mountains, escape sea monsters, and survive rocks falling on them, all without mask powers. But they're outmatched by some pillars coming out of the ground on an otherwise flat surface. Anyway, Wakama, Nokama, and Matao manage to escape while the other 3 Toa are captured off screen. As they escape via this water tunnel thing, Kreka and Diki give chase. By the way, can I just mention that every time I look at Kreka, I have to do mental gymnastics? Like, his eyes are here, but whenever I look at him, my brain treats these dark spots as his eyes. Is that just me? Oh, and it's revealed that Duma is working with none other but the Makuta.
The mask of time is not yet completed.
No. But when the great shadow falls, the Vaki will ensure every Matoran's fate.
Going back to our not-so-captured trio, they end up falling out of the warp tube thing they were riding in because reasons. And while they're all hanging on for dear life, Wakama gets another vision. If these visions are supposed to be messages from Great Spirit, then surely could have gotten him at a slightly better time. Like, imagine if you have to act fast and not die, and suddenly God just blocks your vision because he wanted to show you a cool video he found.
Everyone all right?
Oh, sure fine. Just enjoying the view.
A country's future depends on its ability to bite back. We can no longer be a nation indentured. Our very salvation is at stake. Together, we must brace ourselves. As we cross over to the...
Whatever the case, they accidentally drop Matao. But luckily, Matao just so happens to discover that he can fly. He doesn't do this ever again for the rest of the film. The other 2 also manage to get to the ground safely. And while Wakama is playing around with the great disc that he still has on him, because I mean, what else is he gonna do with them, leave them at goodwill? They see Khan's spirit star in the sky. They figure that they can guide them towards Khan himself, so they jump on board one of these transport things to follow it. On board, they discover these strange looking storage containers. Wakama touches it and gets another vision. I actually really like the look of this vision. The way the camera travels up this wall of pods, the heartbeat, the breathing, the way this Matoran jump scares you with his dead eyes. It all comes together really nicely, I like it. So the gang gets off the walking transport thing is in the Metru, only to discover that it's strangely empty. Then some shenanigans ensue, which result in the 3 Toa being chased by a herd of these Kikonalo guys. And while they're running, Nokama finally learns how to use her mask power, allowing her to speak to animals, or Rahi as they're called. They then ride the Kakinalo to their next destination. Incidentally, for a while now there's been this B-plot going on where the 3 Toa that got captured have been stuck in some jail cell with this random Turaga whose identity is just a complete and total mystery, I swear. I haven't brought it up until now because frankly, there's just nothing to bring up. Every scene with this B-plot has just been these characters exchanging 2 or 3 sentences and then cut back to whatever Wakama, Nokama and Mata were up to. Only reason I bring this up now is because at this point in the movie, they just start to randomly discover their mask powers. And I do mean randomly, like, just look at this bit here.
Waste of time!
Without self-discovery, you will never find your destiny. This is every Toa's duty to the Great Spirit.
This whole thing was a load of duty, if you ask me.
Sit down, Wenua.
Taking orders from a Turaga was one thing, but from an overgrown hammer swinger...
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down now.
That's it. Your history builder.
What made him discover his mask power here? If you look at Nakama, she was surrounded by Rahi and needed to do something about her Rahi in order to survive, and so it makes sense for her Rahi-related mask power to turn on. But Onuwa's mask power turns on because he wanted Wenua to sit? Wenua is completely after Turaga, not him, and he wasn't being particularly aggressive either, so it's not like he needed to be calmed or whatever. Onuwa just randomly decided that Wenua should sit on the ground, and that's how he discovered his mask power. I mean, I guess there's one way to write a movie. Ominuji also discovers his power, which is telekinesis, but at least that was because he wanted to stop Onuwa and Wenua from fighting, so it kinda makes sense because cause and effect is actually used as a part of the writing here, instead of just making things happen because they need to happen before the movie ends. Also, Nuji's power opened a hole in the wall, so they escape, I guess. Going back to our main terrific trio, they get attacked by the Dark Hunters, but Matao manages to deal with them using his mass power of shapeshifting.
Nediki! Where'd the Toa go?
You must have let him slip past. Circle the other way back.
Yeah. Let go!
Where's the Toa?
Shape-shifting. Some mass powers are worth the wait.
Wait, what? When did he learn to use that? When Okama, Nuji, and even Onuma used their mass powers for the first time, they didn't realize they were really using them at first because it was their first time using it. But then Mato is over here acting like he's already mastered it. They accidentally ripple delete the scene where he discovered his mass powers while editing or something? Regardless, the poor thing from earlier watches all the going ons and reports back to Turagaduma, who is revealed to be Makuta in disguise. So like, was he just talking to himself earlier, or what? Getting back to our not so terrific trio, Wenua also just discovers his mask power out of nowhere. So all Toa reunite, Wakama sad because he hasn't found his mask power yet, and they discover that this random Turaga of unknown identity is actually Toa Likan, who sacrificed his power to create the Toa Metru and became a Turaga in the process.
Why didn't you tell us who you were?
Your task was to discover who you are. Only with such knowledge would your powers reveal themselves.
You know, I would make fun of this plot twist for being kind of obvious, but this is a kid's movie for 7-year-olds. And when I watched this movie for the first time, I was twice that age and didn't realize who this Turaga was. Though it also took me a while to realize that this guy wasn't Tahoe, so maybe I was stupid. Not that has changed much since then, but still. But anyway, it turns out that they weren't actually supposed to save Likan, they were supposed to save Matoran, for they are the heart of Metru Nui. Oh, and they find a real Turagaduma in there, in one of those pod things from earlier. Why was he just in a random corridor somewhere? Whatever. While this fun reunion stuff is happening, Makuta, posing as Duma, is forcing all the Matoran to enter the pods. Then the Toa crash the party just in time to be too late. But they at least get to hear Makuta's plan to basically put all the Matoran to sleep so Makuta can wake them up as their new leader. Then he goes and puts the Great Spirit itself to sleep. See, it's just like the beginning of the first movie. This is always my favorite part of these kinds of prequels, where everything starts to go from bad to irreversibly bad. Most action movies tend to have a happy ending, because it'd be kinda deflating if our heroes spend the entire movie fighting to save the day, only to lose. But if the movie takes place before another movie where everything starts out bad, then the heroes kinda have to lose for the overarching plot to make sense. And it's just so interesting to see stories where everything goes dark in the end, the villains win, and instead of winning the day, our heroes just have to make the best of a bad situation. But I digress. So the Toa decide to steal the Matoran pod thing so they can bring the Matoran to safety. Wakama receives one final vision, which tells him that their destiny lies beyond the Great Barrier. But on their way to the Great Barrier, they are interrupted by Umkuta, who cannibalized Kreka and Ediki to build a new body for himself. Nuya uses his mask power to bring Wakama up to him so he can keep him busy while the others save the Matoran.
The Mask of Time. You are a great mask maker. You could have many destinies. Come, join my brothers and me.
I desire just one noble destiny, more than any power you can offer me.
Okay, you wanna know something cool? Like really cool? So notice how it says my brothers. Not brother, he's not referring to Matanui or whatever, he's referring to the Brotherhood of Makuta. See, in Bionicle, Makuta is actually a species, with the Makuta actually being named Pterodax. Together all the Makuta form a brotherhood, whose purpose was to create Rahi and protect the Matoran. In fact, Lee Khan even mentions this in the film.
Makuta, you were sworn to protect the Matoran!
I shall.
Wanna know what the cool part is? We didn't get to know there was more than one Makuta until 2008. 4 years after this movie released. See, this is one of the reasons I love Bionicle. The story wasn't just made up on the spot to make sense of whatever toys they wanted to sell that year. It's all planned out. Like, yeah, a lot of finer details were probably figured out based on where the toy line itself was heading, because that's just how toy lines work. But the deeper lore and all the main plot points, all of that was worked out years in advance of those things being told. And you can prove that because there are hints to future plot twists sprinkled throughout Bionicle's entire run. I can't think of any other stories, even non-toyline related stories, that so thoroughly plan out not just what happened before the story takes place, but also where the story will go. And is thus able to foreshadow that story several years before it even has a chance to get to those plot points. But I'm getting ahead of myself now, like beyond this movie's story levels of ahead of myself. So let's get back to whatever's going on here. Makuta attacks Wakama, but then Lee Khan jumps in and takes the hit. Then Makuta jumps off to grab the Mask of Time that Wakama dropped. Lee Khan dies from the attack and gives his mask to Wakama, which makes Wakama finally unlock his mask power because he accepts he's a Toa now, I guess. So he uses his newfound power to shoot the Mask of Time out of Makuta's hands, and then proceeds to fight him. I'm not the first person to say this, but this whole fight sucks. It looks like some rubbish boss fight. Wakama manages to get Makuta stuck on a wall, and then he and the other Toa use their Toa powers to encase him in a big crystal. The Toa then carry the Matoran to the shores of this island, and sacrifice their powers to reawaken them, becoming Turaga in the process. The Matoran, Toa, and Turaga are all the same, only different parts of the same life cycle. Lastly, we see some familiar faces. Taku is there, the Flax Collector is there, and Jaller even receives the mask of Toa Lee Khan. Metru Nui may be lost, but its heart will live on into a brighter future. And with that, roll credits. Oh look, in the special thanks here are a bunch of fun titles written in Matoran. Let's see, we got Stunt Double from Matao, Security from Metru Nui, good job. And we also got Nivak Handler? What's a Nivak? Oh, it's the bird thing. Wait, why is it a SpongeBob wiki? What is this? What have I found? Clam Lounge Squadron and the Shell Lodge Squad? Let's see, who are the members of the Shell Lodge Squad? We got, founder / mentally impaired one. Very important roles. We have the paranoid one. we need Skipper. He's the paranoid one. He's the one who makes sure we don't get caught off guard. Oh crap, right, Bionicle movie. Is Bionicle movie good? You know what, let's start on a positive note by talking about Wakama. Yeah, let's talk about Wakama. I wouldn't quite call him the main character, as the movie's focus is pretty evenly spread between him, Nokama, and Matao. However, he is the character whose arc feels the most developed, and he is the most representative of how the Toa in this movie don't really know what they're doing. At first, he blames himself for Lee Khan's defeat, and so when he becomes a Toa, he feels he has to fill the shoes of someone he stole the shoes from. Does that metaphor make sense? And so while he is constantly doing his very best, and arguably does achieve great things, his uncertainty and guilt stops him from accepting he's a true Toa. And honestly, I really like his character. Yeah, he complains about himself a lot, but he never gives up or tries to let everyone else do the job for him. and his self-deprecation is never an excuse to try less. It's really just him trying to tell everyone not to get their hopes up. If you really wanted to, I guess you could see Wakama as a metaphor for being a young adult. Like, you're old enough to be an adult and you're doing all the adult things, yet you might feel like you're not adult enough, because as a child you saw adults as far more impressive than you yourself turned out to be. Or maybe I'm just reading into it too much. Either way though, I quite like his character. Although I can definitely see how some might just consider him to be whining and annoying. Like, every setback makes him complain about himself. He's like a heroic version of that kid in elementary school who would cry every time they got slightly confused. Looking back, I think that kid might have been me actually. However, I don't think Wakama is the reason why, as I mentioned earlier, the consensus in this movie is kinda split. So then what is? It is clear to me why some people think this is the best out of all the Bionicle movies. For one, the setting is just excellent. Yeah, it's a high-tech robot city with robot-looking characters, but it's a really unique high-tech robot city. Everything is a creature of some kind, like these transportation thingies with legs. And the elemental theming and things like how they get around using these water tubes is like nothing I've ever seen before. Even beyond that, this movie just has a lot of great ideas. The fall of Metru, a team of Toa have no idea how to be a Toa and just kinda have to wing it while the whole world rests on their shoulders, etc. But there's one problem, one fatal flaw that sinks this whole movie. Like a good person taking a swim with a rock tied to their leg. The movie is only 72 minutes long, which means that for all its great ideas, for all the good things it tries to do, there's just not enough time to do anything with them. Take the characters for example. All the characters have this arc where they have to learn to use their mask powers, but because the movie is so short, half the characters just get their mask powers out of nowhere. On top of that, half the main cast spent half the movie in a cave instead of actually going on an interesting adventure like the rest of the cast. Or how about Makuta and the way he takes over Metru? From what we see of his plan, he ordered the Dark Hunters to kill the Toa one by one, all while posing as Turagaduma so he can replace the noble Toa with obedient Waki, and from there use the Waki to force Mator into pods, so they go to sleep and wake up with Makuta as the new Great Spirit. That's a fascinating idea, but it falls flat because we barely see any of it. We don't get to see what it's like for Matoran to live through all this. The movie starts with all our main characters as Matoran, so we could have gotten to see them perhaps falling for Makuta's deception only to discover the truth as they become Toa. So basically the plot of Transformers 1. Then there's also smaller things like how Mata just forgets he can fly, or how certain plot plots just happen with no real rhyme or reason, like when the gang just finds Duma in a random corridor somewhere. The most egregious example is of course the fact that they just skip over the entire segment where they collect the Great Discs. And yes, like I mentioned before, you can read all about that in the Bionicle comic. But that's not a solution. Imagine if in Iron Man they just skipped over the whole segment where Tony Stark was trapped in a cave by terrorists and built the first Iron Man suit, and instead we just cut him already having built the Mark II. Wanna know how he got here? Go buy the Iron Man comic book at your local grocery store, located near the cashiers next to that Disney magazine with the cheap toy that breaks in 5 seconds if you play with it. But I get why they did this. If you look back at Mask of Light, that movie was designed around its runtime. It mostly focused on one main character, we already knew the world from earlier stories, and this new story was really simple, just get from point A to point B. But in Legends of Metru, the movie is trying to fit 6 main characters, each with their own character arc, a plot by the villain to eliminate Metru's Toa so he can replace them with a robotic police force so he can force people to go into sleeping pods and thus take over the world building for an entirely new location unlike anything we've ever seen before, and creating a believable connection between this story and the ones that come after it. All of that in just 72 minutes. So they had to cut the disc collectathon because even without it, the movie's imploding into a black hole with how much he's trying to compress into such a small space. I'm gonna be completely honest. I really wanted to like this movie. I liked the first one, and I remember this one being my favorite when I was a kid. And there is a lot to like about it. The setting, the ideas it presents, the aesthetic of it all. Akama. Hell, even things like the voice acting and character interactions aren't half bad. Not to mention I quite like the ending. Video game-esque and the battle aside. I truly believe that there is a genuinely great movie hidden deep within Legends of Metru, but it's so short and rushed that it ultimately falls flat. Instead of this thought-provoking, character-driven journey it's trying to be, it just ends up being a fast-paced mess of a film where plot points just happen without proper build-up or reason. It's far from the worst film I've ever seen. Trust me, I've seen worse. Far worse. But I'm sorry, I just can't recommend this one. The only people who would recommend it to are Bionicle fans, and even then, it's less of a must-watch for fans and more of a, well, you like Bionicle and it's only 72 minutes, so might as well give it a shot just so you can join the conversation. Well, that's a bit of a bummer note to end on. But you know what? This movie had it coming. Notice, in Mask of Flight, how it says that no Rahi were harmed in making this film. Yet in Legends of Metru, this message is entirely absent. You know what that means? They hurt Bird, my beloved! How dare they hurt that poor bastard! For this, I will have their... Oh crap, I think the port side thruster blew up. Not to worry though, we should just end up drifting into space, so I will have time to fix it.